everyone, welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm super excited to share with all of you a foundation showdown. So I'll be comparing two very pricey and luxurious foundations, the Tom Ford Shade and Illuminate foundation, and the MER Soft Fluid Longwear foundation. So I was inspired to create this video because recently I was thinking about my makeup collection, and foundation is definitely the product I have the least of. So most days I just go in with a skin tint. Recently I've been loving the M Cosmetics and the Chantecaille skin tints. And so I figured, since I don't use foundation that much, why not splurge and go for a super pricey foundation? And so I tried to find information online comparing the MER and the Tom Ford foundations, and I found a few videos here and there, but really not many with folks with my skin tone. And so I thought it'd be fun to do a wear test with the two of them and compare them and see which one I want to purchase a full bottle of. So over the weekend, I got these two little samples from Nordstrom. I have the Shade and Illuminate in shade 5.5 Bisque and the MER foundation in shade 230 Light Ochre. So if you're interested in seeing how these foundations compare and how they wear over the day, then just stick around. So first off, before I put these foundations on my face, let's just talk a little bit about the differences in their claims and formulations. So both of the foundations are described as medium to full coverage, and both of them have some skincare benefits as well. So the Tom Ford foundation is SPF 50, whereas the MER is SPF 20. The Tom Ford one comes with hyaluronic acid and also a special blend of oils, along with an anti-inflammatory fruit extract. So the claim is that the Tom Ford foundation will leave a very dewy, refreshed look. The MER foundation has the Miracle Broth in it, which is MER's famous ingredient, and it also claims to combine hydration with luminous color. The MER one does, though, emphasize more so that it's a long wear foundation and claims that it stays true even in humidity. In terms of the price tag, the Tom Ford rings in at $150. Yes, very, very pricey for foundation. And the MER is at $135, so just a little bit less. So without further ado, let's put these foundations on my face. So here is a swatch of the Tom Ford Shade and Illuminate in shade 5.5. And this is a relatively thin, liquidous formula that leaves a subtle sheen when it dries down. And swatched next to it is the MER foundation, which has more of a creamy, almost skincare consistency to it. It's definitely a little bit thicker than the Tom Ford, and the shade I got, even though I got shade matched on the same day, looks a little bit lighter in the MER compared to the Tom Ford. I would say that the Tom Ford, perhaps because it's a more liquid consistency, dries down a little bit more quickly in comparison to the MER. And you can also see in the containers the differences in consistency. So this one over here is the Tom Ford, and it's much more liquid in comparison to the MER, which has much more of a thick, creamy texture. So let me first put the Tom Ford on the right side of my face. And actually that one little tap I think is gonna be probably enough to cover this half of my face. I thought I was gonna have to build this up a lot more, but this is looking like it gives a decent amount of coverage. This does look like it's a little bit deeper than my face. I feel like nowadays it's a little bit hard to get your right shade in store because, you know, your mask is kind of covering most of your face. And so this is definitely a really good match for my forehead, but a little bit deep for my face. In terms of scent, this has a slight sunscreen scent to it. This is the one with higher SPF. It has SPF 50, so that's understandable. But just wanted to note that in case you don't really like that sunscreen scent. So here we have one layer of the Tom Ford Shade and Illuminate on this side of my face, and this side is bare. I would say I got pretty decent coverage with just that one little tap of my finger into the product. So I have some acne scarring up here, and you can see that covered that up a little bit, so I'm happy about that. Now that the product is blended out more, I feel like the shade match is actually okay. So it might be that once it blends out, the sunscreen elements in it maybe add a little bit more reflectivity. So it doesn't actually look too deep on my skin, even though it looked a little deep at first. I am liking this finish so far. It's pretty dewy and skin-like. It doesn't really look like I have foundation on. I kind of just feel like I put on some sunscreen. So there's a little bit of khaki-ness to my face at the moment. I think normally I would probably like to set this with a little bit of powder, but today I'm just gonna leave it because I wanna see how these foundations wear by themselves. But I did wanna just note that in case I look like a grease ball later today, it's probably because of the lack of powder. It's not necessarily to say that the foundation doesn't work. And actually, since I still have a lot of this, I might do a second wear test where I powder things down. So stay tuned for that. All right, so now let's go into Le MER. And I think I picked up less on this finger, so I'm gonna dip in again after this. Again, I'm just gonna go for a single layer of both of these foundations. Basically wanna get this just to the medium coverage that it's supposed to provide. Okay, that was very easy to blend in. So let me just add a little bit more. I will say this Le MER one is a little bit light on my forehead, but it seems like a pretty good match for the rest of my face. Alright, so here we have the Le MER on this side of my face and the Tom Ford on this side of my face. Let me know in the comments down below if you guys can see any differences on camera. I would say the differences I've noticed so far are, first off, definitely the texture is quite distinct. And on this side of my face with the Le MER, I felt that the cream was a little bit easier to blend in with my finger. Of course, if I was using a sponge, maybe that would be a little bit different. In terms of the shade, now that both are on my face, I think it actually looks fine. It doesn't really, at least to me, look like I have two different shades. That said, if I was gonna be really particular, I would say that this one, the Le MER side, is a little bit less warm in hue, a little bit more rosy in undertone, and this one on the Tom Ford side is a little bit deeper. And I think you can see those subtle differences in the swatches as well, which have now dried down. So this is the Tom Ford and this is the Le MER. I did notice that both of them had a little bit of trouble along my hairline, so there was a tiny bit of pilling on both sides, but that's okay. It's to be expected, I guess, and nothing that bronzer can't fix. So now I'm gonna go off and finish off the rest of my makeup and do a few check-ins with you guys as this makeup wears. So here we are with the completed makeup look, and this is also the 2-hour check-in mark. So I've been filming videos for the past couple hours, and so I've had my studio lights on, and so these foundations have been subjected to some heat. Looking at both of these foundations closely, I would say they both are looking pretty good. There are just a few differences that I've noticed so far. So first off, I would definitely say that the Tom Ford side has a little bit more glow to it in comparison to the Le MER. Overall, I like a slightly glowier finish, but I am noticing, at least in this part of my face, and I'm not sure if the camera will pick this up, but for some reason the Tom Ford formula seems to be accentuating my pores a little bit over here. It's not doing that on my cheeks or chin or anywhere else on my face, but just in this area, something about the formula is just emphasizing my texture. Overall though, both of them are looking pretty good. So that's it for my 2-hour check-in, and I'll be back in a few more hours with any updates. So here we are 7 hours later at the end of my wear test. So I really put these foundations through the ringer today. So I filmed a video with this makeup look, and I also worked out and went on a walk. And so I feel like this foundation has held up remarkably well considering all the things that I've done. Just to give you guys a closer up look, overall both foundations are very smooth, and despite the fact that I did not powder today, I feel like both of them are looking pretty good. I would probably normally put a little bit of powder around my nose, but even without powder, they both look really good. I did not put on concealer today, so any coverage you're seeing is just from the foundation. I will say neither of them performed super well in the under eye area, which is to be expected, but they've definitely faded away a decent amount there. That's fine though, that's what I would expect with a foundation rather than a concealer, and also considering I did not powder. That said, I will say that I think the Tom Ford emphasized my pores and texture a little bit more on my face. And there was slightly more breaking up of the product around, say, my nose and around my hairline. And if I look really closely, for example, around my brow, there's also a little bit of breaking up of the product. In contrast, I feel like the La Mer looks a little bit more seamless throughout. It looks a little bit more like the product has really blended and sunk in. Because for today's video, I only applied a medium coverage of both of these and did not powder. I am though gonna do another wear test in the next few days where I do more of a full beat. So I'll build these up to closer to fuller coverage and then add concealer and powder on top so that we can test it that way. I figure with a thicker layer that might emphasize some of the differences between these two formulas a little bit more. And we're back. So it's a new day and I don't have any makeup on yet. And so today I wanted to use the rest of these little pots of foundation to do a full beat. So previously I did a pretty light layer of each, did not powder, did not use concealer. And so today we're gonna do things a little bit differently and try to build these up to full coverage and also use a full face of base products. So to start out, today I'm gonna use La Mer on this side of the face, which is the opposite of what I did previously, because this side of my face does have a bit more texture, and so I wanna give both foundations an equal shot. So starting out, I'm just gonna dot this all over my face. And since I'm building up multiple layers today, I'm gonna use a damp beauty blender. One thing I don't think I mentioned before is that the La Mer foundation does have a pretty strong fragrance to it. So it's sort of a floral scent. Overall, I think the scent is quite pleasant, but I did notice that today, just the moment I opened the little container, I did get quite a pungent whiff. Going in now with round 2. Alrighty, so with 2 layers, we have pretty decent coverage. I can't really see my acne scarring very much anymore, but because I want to go all out today, I'm going to do one more layer. Alrighty, so here we have 3 layers of La Mer on this side, and my face is bare on this side. I was definitely able to get pretty decent coverage from this foundation with 3 layers, and I don't see any cakiness or any unnatural texture. Even though I have layered it on a lot, it looks pretty smooth and perfected overall. Alrighty, so now let's go in with Tom Ford. In terms of scent, this has more of a lavender scent to it, so a little bit more spa-like compared to the La Mer. Now I'm going to use the other side of my sponge so we don't have any cross-pollination. Just use this to dab it into the skin. Alright, so here we have 1 light layer, and that was pretty light coverage. I feel like I still see the redness around my eye area. So now let's go in with round 2. And I am really interested in seeing how this builds, given that it does have a much more runny consistency in comparison to the La Mer. Hopefully that means that it feels less thick on the skin. And now for the 3rd layer. Alrighty, so here are the 2 foundations on. So again, Tom Ford on this side, La Mer on this side. Upon initial application, they look very similar. Since they haven't oxidized yet, I don't really see much of a shade difference, which is good. One thing I have already noticed though is, so the last time I had the Tom Ford on this side, I noticed that it kind of emphasized the texture that I have here. And today it's doing that same thing on this part of my face. So I'm not really sure what it is about this formulation. It's not a big deal, but it does just make my pores in this area look slightly emphasized, and the La Mer is not doing that. So that's the only tiny nitpicky thing that I would say is different so far. So here we are about an hour since I last saw you guys. So I finished up my makeup look for today. And I would say that at the moment, I honestly can't tell much of a difference between the 2 foundations. The pore emphasizing issue I was having on the Tom Ford side is now actually happening a little bit on the La Mer side as well, so that's no longer necessarily a distinguishing factor between the 2. Overall, I think they look pretty nice and pretty perfected. Applying powder products on both was really easy. I didn't have any issues with blendability of my bronzer, highlight, or blush, so far so good on that end. So not a lot to report at the moment, but I did just want to show you guys my look for today. So we're at the 3.5, almost 4 hour mark, so I figured it'd be a good time to do a check-in. So as you can see, my lipstick has basically totally faded off, but the foundations are actually still doing pretty well. So I actually went out, got some lunch, did some grocery shopping, and I was wearing a mask and sunglasses. So I was pretty sure the foundation was gonna fare pretty poorly. But I would actually say I'm quite impressed with how it's looking. So when I first took off my mask and took off my sunglasses, I did notice that there was some fading away and some creasing from that. But I feel like the product's almost kind of resettled back into my skin. So now I don't see those lines as clearly. In terms of the small differences that I do see, I do feel like the Tom Ford faded a little bit more on this side where my mask was in comparison to the La Mer. I am really impressed how these two have held up though, especially since today was a pretty sunny day, and with the mask and with the sunglasses, I thought they would be in much worse shape. So here we are at the 11-hour mark. So this is my final check-in for these two foundations. Overall, I would say I am extremely impressed with how both of these foundations wore. So since my last check-in, I went on a run outside in pretty hot weather. So this foundation has really been through quite a lot today. Overall, I would say I think both of them actually still look pretty good. They don't look cakey. I don't feel like I look greasy at all. I don't see any patchiness in the foundation. That said, I think if I look super closely, I do feel like on the Tom Ford side, there is just a little bit more separation in some of the areas where I have creases or wrinkles. So that's just the tiniest bit of a difference that I've seen. I think the La Mer overall has been a little bit more flattering for texture on my skin. So in terms of my overall evaluation of both of these, I think they're overall really amazing. And if you're willing to pay the really hefty luxury price, I don't think you'll be disappointed with one of these versus the other. That said, I think there are a few key factors for consideration. So first and foremost, of course, there is price. So the Tom Ford side is $150, whereas the La Mer is $135. Also, you can frequently get the La Mer foundation on sale because it's sold at Sephora, Blue Mercury, and other retailers that frequently have site-wide sales, whereas the Tom Ford is sold at retailers like Nordstrom's and Saks, which generally don't. So for example, if you get the La Mer foundation during the Sephora VIB sale, then we're talking more about $110 in comparison to the Tom Ford $150. Other factors to consider are the SPF content. So the Tom Ford has SPF 50, whereas the La Mer only has SPF 20. So if you live somewhere with significant sun exposure, it might be better to consider the Tom Ford, especially if you're not wearing any sunscreen underneath. If you always wear sunscreen, even when you have foundation, then maybe the La Mer is good enough. Another factor is the scent. So both of these have some significant scent to them. I would say the Tom Ford is a little bit lighter and it's more of a lavender and slight sunscreen scent. The La Mer is a very strong floral fragrance. So depending on how you feel about fragrances, that might be another determining factor. Also, in terms of texture, the La Mer is much more of a thick cream, whereas the Tom Ford is a really runny liquid. So if you primarily put on foundation with your fingers, you might prefer the La Mer one a little bit more just because I think the creamy texture makes it feel a lot more like a moisturizer to put on, whereas the liquidy texture of the Tom Ford I think is a little bit easier to apply with the brush or with a sponge. In terms of the finish of the two foundations, I think the Tom Ford is slightly more natural and skin-like and also looks a little bit more hydrated, whereas the La Mer is a little bit more perfecting on the skin. I did find today with 3 layers of both of them plus powder, they were a little bit drying on the skin, so that's one thing I'll warn you about if you do have dry skin like myself. You probably want to be careful about powdering. When I only put 1 layer of each on and I didn't have powder, it felt really comfortable throughout the day. I think for me personally, the one that I prefer after these 2 wear tests is the La Mer, just because I feel like the difference in finish is really not worth the additional $40 for the Tom Ford. Plus, I do feel like the La Mer sits a little bit better on the skin, and especially in places where I have creasing or wrinkles, looks just ever so slightly more flattering. and emphasizes texture just a little bit less than the Tom Ford. I'm really splitting hairs on that one, but considering the price difference, the Le MER just comes out on top. Also, the shade for the Le MER just looks a little bit better on my skin because it's a little bit less yellow and has a bit more rose to it, even though it's a shade for golden undertones. I will say though, one downside about the Le MER is it does oxidize quite a bit more than the Tom Ford. So when I did swatches the other day, the Le MER started out looking lighter than the Tom Ford, but at the end of the day looked a little bit deeper. So that's just something to note if you are trying on shades in store. But overall, I think these are both great. Le MER just comes out a little bit on top for me, but I am really impressed with both of these foundations. So if you guys have tried either or both of these foundations, I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. And also, if you have a favorite foundation, please let me know, because for this video, I kind of went with the two most expensive, but I'm also interested in expanding my foundation collection in more of the middle of the luxury range. So, you know, more like $50 to $75 instead of $100+. My guess is that there's honestly not too huge of a difference between either of these and a foundation that's like half the price. But let me know in the comments below if you guys have a favorite foundation, and hopefully I can try that out at some point. So that's it for today's video. If you guys like this video, then please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you all so much for joining me today, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!